I just want to thank everyone for being here. We have the two directors, John Shenk and Bonnie Cohen, and we have Marcus and Amber Capone. And the film is brilliant. I want to start with that. And I want to say how courageous it is for Amber and Marcus to talk about this. It takes a lot of courage. Um, I want to start with you, John and Bonnie. And why don't we start with you, Bonnie, to just talk about how this came about? I think people who see this, it's so powerful, will know why you wanted to do it, but how it came about.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here with us. We're really grateful. Um, we actually have done quite a bit of work with Participant Media, which was a studio in Los Angeles. It's now no longer, but famous for films like An Inconvenient Truth, Lincoln, um, Roma. I mean, they do, a lot of really impactful social issue documentaries and narrative features across the spectrum. And Jeff Skoll, who started the company, was talking with some folks in Silicon Valley that he knew about this new psychedelic remedy that they had started to research and get into, and he was really intrigued by it. It was brought to him by this guy, Jameis McNiven, and he knew Marcus and Amber and started to tell their story. And he thought, my God, I have to bring this to life in a film. So he rallied his head of documentary, Diane Wireman, who we've done a lot of work with, and she approached us and started telling us about this meeting that she had then had with Marcus and Amber Capone, and their story about coming back from war, having been a Navy SEAL, the impacts on the families, and that nothing was helping. And they went down this alternative therapy route, this psychedelic drug that was not legal in the United States. You had to go to Mexico for it. And we started to put all these pieces together from our perspective as filmmakers. All the ingredients were there for a very impactful, very interesting, very emotional film that no one really knew much about. And a community of people in our country that we think are getting help, but they're really not. These heroes in our country who are really not getting the help that they need. So we started working with Participant early on and had the opportunity to meet Marcus and Amber. And then we were off to the races because the second you meet Marcus and Amber and hear their stories personally, there's no going back. They're very gifted storytellers themselves, and also very passionate about this subject.
John, do you want to, I was going to say, I imagine that it solidified when you met Marcus and Amber.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm always struck by is that in covering war is that people think, okay, well, that's over. So whatever happened to them then is gone and behind them, whether it's a physical injury or an emotional or mental injury. But you meet Marcus and Amber, you know their story is so like so many that does not end, and they struggle finding something.
Yeah, the working title for this film was Odyssey because this story is really an age-old story. Soldiers coming home from years of doing battle, serving their country, just doing just this grueling work that the Navy SEALs were tasked with doing during the global war on terror, and then coming home thinking that the tough part of their life is over, only to realize the second battle to rejoin your family is that battle feels harder than the previous battles that involve life and death decision making minute to minute. It's so overwhelming psychologically because a lot of these guys come back with tremendous physical injuries, TBI, traumatic brain injuries that have literally punished their brains day after day. And many of them have the symptoms that we now know as PTSD, but it's really kind of this sort of blanket term for just an enormous slate of problems that the veterans themselves face in the family. And then you combine that, as Bonnie was saying, with this willingness to go out of bounds because nothing was working to um, go on this really intense psychedelic journey. By all accounts, it just sounded harrowing what they had to go through, but that was worth it because it helped them kind of gain that hope that was down that tunnel. There was a little bit of light, and they were able to walk towards it. And that really, for a documentary film team, what better story can you imagine but one of harrowing difficulty with the hope at the end?
Marcus, I am struck by something John said that these are familiar stories. People go into battle and they come back and they have these psychological wounds and physical wounds. But there has never been anything like what your Navy SEALs went through. This was the forever war. There's never been, in my memory, or even reading history, just over and over and over. You went back and saw your friends and colleagues and fellow SEALs killed, and yet you were back in there. And you've seen that in your community. It's particularly hard on the special operations community. I think people don't realize how many deployments there are and how fast you go back. Talk a bit about training and just going back in there after some of the things you saw and experienced.
Yeah, Martha. I mean, my well, that was very well teed up. So my best friend, my roommate from training, 20 25 years ago now, is still serving. He's still on active duty. He's done over 15 combat deployments, if you can believe that. There's individuals I served with that have done over 20, 22 combat deployments. Literally has been gone 300 days a year, as I was for 10 years, for training, and then goes overseas and deploys for 3, 6, 9 months or more, comes back, trains again, goes back and does that back and forth for, as you just mentioned, we've never been in 20 years of sustained combat. Amber used to say this all the time in our interviews, is that just as a nation, we've never done 20 years of sustained combat. There's individuals I served with, close friends of mine, um, individuals that served in the 90s. There wasn't really wars going on. There was a lot of training, or guys and girls used to go overseas and train with other countries, but they come back, but there wasn't a war. So they'd deploy to the Philippines or to Europe and had these kind of vacation-esque deployments, where now I had a friend tell me when I was serving, he said, Marcus, I've only been to combat. Like, I literally been at combat for 12 years in a row. I don't even know what it's like to go to Germany and ski in Switzerland, or go to the Philippines and hang out. And so I said, be careful, with your tongue, who you talk around, because there are so many individuals that have served so many years and have never gotten to go overseas. And here you are, that's all you know. And so when you come home, what do you do? And I don't think as a nation, we've done a very good job. And I'm not the only one that'll say this, taking care of us as we come home. I mean, obviously, Vietnam, we can't even discuss that, right? Because individuals that came home, we just we turned our back on everybody. At least today, I personally feel there's so much more that's been done. There's so many philanthropic dollars that have been put towards nonprofits like Amber and mine, that help individuals. For someone like me, and so many others, you come home, you're struggling with, as John mentioned, some TBIs, maybe some PTSD, some depression. Transition becomes a nightmare. There's no purpose, there's no passion. You start to decline. You get handed antidepressants and some talk therapy. I mean, that's the status quo. And that's 40-year-old technology. I mean, Prozac was invented 40 years ago. We're still using antidepressants to deal with all these things. And so we just need to do a better job. And that's what we're doing with these alternative treatments, is searching for really affordable access to innovative treatments that really help. And I think we found something that works. There's others that are out there, and we're just excited to be a part of this journey. So
I want to come back to you and some other questions, but I want to get Amber in the conversation. And what you say about we are not very good at it as a nation of dealing with your injuries and your psychological trauma and others who are there. What we're really bad at is dealing with the spouses and the families, and so little attention is paid to that. Broke my heart hearing your son talk about what he went through during those years. And Amber, that I think that you stayed there And you hung in there and you've done all this work to make things better. And these therapies is just incredible. I cannot say enough about you, but I want you to talk about what
Mm.
that was like and the process with him, with your children. You're taking care of your children at the same time and seeing what they're suffering through. And yet you came out with this incredibly hopeful message and helpful.
I think, Martha, well, first of all, just to acknowledge your point, um, I wholeheartedly believe that the spouses and children of the military and veteran communities are the unsung heroes. There are a lot of programs in place for those who serve, but the families serve as well. And we sacrificed a lot of time with Marcus, a lot of firsts, a lot of holidays and birthdays and really special occasions for this nation. And so, there after 9/11, I remember feeling this righteous anger, being just very proud of Marcus's service and wanting, to do our part in keeping America safe. And it was easy to make those sacrifices in the beginning. But then when I started losing touch with Marcus, who started losing touch with the family and himself, I did become resentful. And that escalated further when he transitioned out of the military. And then it was like, hey, thanks. You gave us the best years of your life. The best we can give you is a prescription for absolutely everything.
Mm.
And those prescriptions are going to cause side effects. We have prescriptions for those as well. You can wait months for a VA appointment if you are willing to take a chance on one of our providers, and your provider will probably change 9 times between then and now. So it's this unbelievably frustrating set of circumstances where you're like, I was willing to give everything for this cause. And now it has turned on me. So I did find myself on a new battlefield, and I was partnered with one of the most capable war fighters I know. And I was so proud of his service. And I realized this is a battle that I have to lead. And the the thought of losing him to suicide after we had survived the wars was just something that I would not settle for without a fight. I didn't want to become a statistic. I didn't even want to become a divorce statistic. But when your kids are living in a home where suicide feels inevitable, you just find it. I think as a woman, as a mother, you just find this will to fight. I wanted better for my family. I wanted better for my children. And much like the SEAL community itself, which is full of risk takers and unconventional thinkers, I realized that we had to take a real long shot.
And Bonnie or John, when you found out about this treatment and how you treat it in the film, I think it's an amazing thing that you do to show what Marcus and the other SEALs were going through, what Amber was going through at that time, but your multiple deployments and showing what you actually went through to show the trauma and then show what you found as a solution. Talk more about how you have to go out of the country to get it and what it entails, and then we'll have Marcus describe that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. People see the film and they ask us, is this a war film or a treatment film? Is this a film about the military or is it a film about hope and resilience after? And interestingly, as filmmakers, we had to make calculations about how much time you need really in a film. You need to spend understanding someone's story, understanding what they've been through in order to have stake in their recovery. Right. So we really wanted to dive deeply into what they had been through so that when they do go through the treatment, which is very visual in the film and brings up a lot of trauma, both battlefield, but interestingly, much trauma that happened before they even went into battle from earlier in their lives. You needed to understand who they were as people. So we spent a lot of time with these guys, and uh, I think that by the time you get to the treatment, you really have stake in their recovery and what they go through. Amber describes in the film, and she also had described to us many times that um, this was like the last stop on the train. They had tried everything. She is, the VA, yes, but then plus all these other opportunities for studying the brain and doing work with the brain. This treatment was the last stop. She was just ready for it to be over, and she thought, I'm going to have, if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to leave. So that to us was just so, it was so dramatic and so interesting to hear that there was this provider south of the border of the United States that may have some kind of not solution, but an opening for the start of recovery for our guys. And, so to us, it was, even though it's not legal in the US and it's a little, it's still hard for some people to wrap their heads around.
Somebody called
We
it a
felt it.
crazy hippie ass thing, right?
Great. Well, that's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
How am I going to go to this crazy hippie ass thing? I think that was Marcus himself. And can you imagine telling these guys to go? They're going to go to Mexico and start tripping and discovering things about themselves that might even be scarier than what happened to them in war. So it was just a crazy ride, and I cannot overemphasize that these women, both Amber and Patsy Shipley, that you hear from in the film, Patsy ends up calling Amber and begs Amber to get her husband, DJ, down to Mexico. If you get at the root of the beginnings of the recovery, it's the women. The women sort of help pull them out of this hole in a way that was sort of miraculous and brave. And I just dream that I would have that resilience in that kind of situation.
Marcus, talk about the difference that you found when you went through this treatment from what you had tried before and the motivation to get there, clearly with Amber's help.
So Western is a great question. So Western medicine does a great job of band-aiding many ailments that you have, whether it's mental health care or other things. We don't do a very good job of proactively getting to the root cause of what is going on in our mind and our bodies. I keep going back to antidepressants because literally that's the first line of defense. And our diagnostics are so poor. That's what we're getting handed like candy, like Pez candy. Antidepressants don't get to root cause. They put a Band-Aid fix. They help the symptoms barely, as I mentioned earlier. Maybe 15% of individuals that start those improve compared to a placebo. I mean, it's pathetic of how an FDA approved product like that. But again, it's still masking the symptoms. What psychedelics do, specifically what ibogaine does, it's where my experience is and where my treatment lies, it gets to the root cause of the issue. And how that works is if someone's experienced any type of trauma that's affecting your day-to-day life, a lot of times those thoughts, those patterns, those traumas are buried deep down in your unconscious or your subconscious. You're not even thinking about those incidences, but they're affecting your everyday life. What these drugs or medicines, really what they do is they actually tap into that subconscious or unconscious thought that's affecting what you're carrying out in your day-to-day life. It brings those to surface. So during your experience, you actually face those thoughts that you may have never been thinking about. You never even crossed your mind. But during the experience, it may gen up those experiences and you actually deal with them. And you deal with them in different ways: first person, second person, third person. So the drug does a really good job of allowing you to look at a situation that you may have dealt with in the past from a different perspective and deal with it in a different perspective. So in the past, this may have really affected you, really hurt you, made you cry, made you angry, made you, sad, happy. It takes that experience and changes it in a way where you can look at it and go, I see that experience. I'm not really depressed anymore. I'm not angry anymore, but I understand what happened there. And enable it to just kind of like brush off and like move on. And that's why these medicines are so powerful, because it really allows you to deal with them in a way that you've never dealt with them before. And as we all know, the only way to solve anything is to get to root cause, to deal with the issue, and to move on. And that's exactly what they do. And that's exactly what the experience with ibogaine does. And unfortunately, it's a long experience. It's about a 6-hour peak experience where you're dealing with a lot of these emotions. And then there's about let's say a 8 to 10 or 12-hour reflection period where you're looking back at those experiences that you may have just been intense and reflect on them. And figure out how you're going to move on and move past them. And so it's really profound. It's not typically what the institutions or the system or providers are used to dealing with, and so it's going to be interesting as these drugs come through the FDA, how they get introduced to the system and how doctors provide care for individuals like myself and so many others that are seeking anything for help.
Is it a one-time experience, or do people go back? Just explain what you have to do to get where you are today.
Yeah, Martha, these are extremely subjective, personalized experiences. So sometimes individuals, it's a one and done, where individual treats one time and is able to move on with the rest of their life and not have to kind of go back there again. Others go back yearly. Others may go back 2 or 3 times. It's really personal. And I think that's where the research is going to come in, because I really don't think we know yet exactly what the answer is. But as we've seen so far through our program, is most of the individuals go through a single time, and some go through our program and then they separately on their own, they go pay and go back yearly for a reset or a reboot, because it just kind of helps them clear their minds, helps them file their folders, in their brain, just helps them become better individuals. It's like everything else. Like I always use the gym. You can't expect to work out for a month or 2 months and be better for the rest of your life. You kind of have to be consistent with that. And it's similar sometimes in this regard.
Amber, and John, I'm going to come to you about what you want to take away from this film. But Amber, talk about your experiences with these psychedelic drugs and watching him, and where you are now with that, and what you want, and the progress that has been made. I know in Texas.
I didn't know that it would work. I really hope that it did. So, up until that point, nothing had worked. I really had to do a mindset shift of, oh, I put all the chips on the table and it actually worked. I wanted at that time to know that I tried everything in order to start forgiving myself if the worst did happen. And when I was dealt back exactly what I had prayed for and hoped for, I didn't really know what to do with it. But I knew one thing, and Marcus said something immediately. I knew we had to help others. We didn't have the courage to speak out at that time because it was still very taboo. And it's taboo to say that you're struggling in our community. It wasn't until almost a year later, when the suicide death of one of our good friends prompted us out of our comfort zones to find the courage to speak out, knowing that it could save someone's life. And so we first just resigned ourselves to getting comfortable sharing our story. And then it became a mission to change the narrative. And I think a big part of that is, I am just as much an advocate, having never used a psychedelic, as Marcus is, having, this has saved his life. So in the work of our nonprofit vets, we provide this sort of triage lifeline to other veterans who are suffering. But as you know, the need is so great. One organization will simply never be able to get ahead of the demand. The only way to do that effectively is through research first, and then pairing these very credible voices alongside the science to advocate for change, which Vets has done successfully at both the state and federal levels of government. To date, we've unlocked nearly $120 million of funding for research. And a lot of Americans don't know that this is happening, and they really don't know the lack of research that exists, which is currently all philanthropically funded for the most part. So we feel really compelled to continue to support the research specific to veterans who would otherwise be ruled out of these studies, because they're a population that stands to benefit the most. We were part of a historic win in Texas this legislative session, where $100 million was unlocked to begin FDA clinical trials on this particular treatment, ibogaine.
And John, the film is hopeful. I mean, that's what we've said. It is a hopeful film. Their story, the stories of other SEALs, and your community is an incredibly hopeful story. And people like films like that. They want to have hope. But beyond that, what do you want to see happen from this?
Well, I think I really hope that this film works on a couple of different levels. I think one level, certainly exactly what Amber is talking about, right? Just simply to shed some light on a deficit that we have um, as a nation, as a military system, when it comes to the treatment of our veterans and their families post-war. I think many Americans understand that that's generally a problem, but specifically, with these the signature wounds of the global war on terror, which are really brain injury and mental health wounds. We have a deficit there, and we have a bias against these medicines that have existed in some cases for hundreds or even thousands of years. That come oftentimes from trees and animals and natural occurring chemicals. That I think there's some policy work to do there, and thank goodness it's already underway with the help of Marcus and Amber in places like Texas and other states that are doing initiatives to study that particular chemical some more, because obviously there's some benefit to be had there. I hope that at another level, the film is a reflection of the profound journeys that Marcus and Amber and others go through when they kind of take the risk to really go and do this therapy. Marcus started to describe Ibogaine. I just want to underline some of the things he said. There is a medicine that you can take. It's a natural occurring thing that allows you to go to have this very vivid visual 6 hour or 10 hour experience where you can go back and revisit key scenes from your life that may have caused you trouble and pain. And you can kind of be there in the present tense as a person looking at a scene. Like many people say, it was like watching a movie or a slideshow or a series of photographs. And you can also feel the emotion of what it was like to be there as a child or as a soldier. And the combination of that, it's almost like a Christopher Nolan film, where you're able to kind of see a scene from the outside and suddenly have this psychological insight that might take 20 or 25 years in a talk therapy session. It's really cinematic just to listen to that and to tell that story. It's also profound because I think we all carry, whether we're soldiers or the wives of soldiers or people that just go through this life on this planet, we all have trouble that we are confused about that cause us pain. And so I think for that reason, people who watch this movie, and we've seen this all over the world now, people watch this movie and just they break down first with kind of profound feeling of intense feeling of their own that they're reminded of, and then with this hope that you described, Martha, at the end, that there might be a way to create a salve for that, to have a comfort that might help you kind of step outside that. I hope the movie works that way. That's really what Bonni and I, working with Marcus and Amber, tried to do, is to create something that would definitely speak to the reality of the difficulties of veterans and their families, but also speak to all humans on Earth who might have had difficulty in their life.
Okay, I want to just thank you all again. It is a beautiful film. It brings up so many issues that people should talk about a lot, and that we as citizens should talk about it a lot. Thank you all. Thank you, especially Amber. I just got to say that because I really, really, that to me was one of the most powerful parts of this film is your courage, Amber, and what you did to help save your husband, to help save your marriage, to help save your family life. And thank you, Bonni and John. Everyone should see this film. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Martha.
much, Martha.